episode, let's try and understand why a culture of freebies works in India and how it can be damaging to the economy and taxpayers in the long term. One state that made the freebie culture famous across India is Tamil Nadu. Now, how did that really happen? Well, in the 1970s and 1980s, M.G. Ramachandran, Tamil Nadu's most iconic chief minister, was faced with the problem of water scarcity. So, how did he really address this challenge? Instead of following through with Andhra Pradesh on completing the Telugu Ganga project, MGR diverted this by introducing a scheme where plastic cans with water were distributed to people in Madras. That way, not only did he make people forget about the water scarcity issue, which would be troubling them again in the long term, but he also tricked them with a short term gain of distributing plastic water containers. Not only this, but even during Jayalalitha's term as the chief minister, bicycles, laptops, gas stoves, cylinders, and many other such materialistic items were distributed. So, this freebie culture was not just restricted to Tamil Nadu alone. It spread to Andhra Pradesh also, and it was very evident during NTR's chief ministership, where a slew of welfare schemes for the poor and subsidies were announced for them. After that, many other states also included loan waivers, reimbursement of education loans, health insurance, and such schemes which directly benefited to different sections of society. While this kind of freebie culture actually could be useful for some sections, it makes us wonder whether this kind of populism is really beneficial to the people of a state, because neither does it better human indicators nor does it enhance development in the state. So, what is the freebie culture really doing to a state or a country is something we're going to look at now. Going with this mindless announcement of freebies and this culture of populism, we do not understand that it puts the state's economy in jeopardy. Let me give you an example of Tamil Nadu itself. The state's debt was around 1 lakh crore as on March 31st in 2011. In 10 years, it has jumped 5 times. So you see how the debt has climbed 5 times more in just 10 years, which means the state spending is much higher than the income it is gaining from different sources. In Tamil Nadu, we see that washing machines were announced. Now, let's try to look at this as an example and try to dissect as to how it could be useful for these families and what kind of burden it causes them financially. Of course, it is a very attractive trick where you are getting a washing machine free. But let us consider this. One has to decide whether it will be an automatic or a manual washing machine. If it's an automatic one, would it be a front load or a top load one? And if it's an automatic one, you need a liquid detergent for it. So include the cost of liquid detergent too. Include the water costs also, apart from the electricity consumption. Now, adding all this, in a BPL family, imagine the costs that will spiral up in terms of water charges and electricity charges, apart from buying all the things that a washing machine requires. So the overall cost of owning a washing machine by these families actually goes up, and eventually a freebie is going to be a financial burden for these families. But who is going to tell these families about these economics? Consider the situation of people in Andhra Pradesh. The current government, in the name of welfare schemes for different sections, has flooded the entire population with cash incentives. Now, going by that, these mouth-watering sops may yield savings of a few thousands of rupees per month per household. But what they don't really understand is that the inflation is rising. What that means is Fuel prices are increasing, electricity and water charges from the state government have gone up, along with the costs hiking for the purchase of non essential commodities. So, all such family units who manage to keep consumption of electricity and water within prescribed limits are actually paying much more for their needs just because they do not understand the economics of how these freebies financially burden them. But do voters really see this trick of political leaders who announce such schemes that could actually jeopardize our own future? This reckless spending of the taxpayers' money on freebies is neither a recognized policy or custom, or neither is it sanctioned in a court of law. It is considered as a blatant financial irregularity where public money is misused just because political parties want to win elections. Now, here's a question I want you to think about. When a political leader tries to give cash or liquor to his voters, he's seen as a corrupt one. But when a political party, in the name of schemes, announces and misuses public money, why don't we call it corrupt? Or why do we not hold the same standards for that political party? States give a justification to this kind of indiscriminate spending, saying that they're doing this for the welfare of the poor. But if you measure how much of this is going to the poor and how well the schemes are being implemented, it is clear that the human indicators have not improved. So, even this kind of culture can actually push a revenue surplus state into a revenue deficit state. Let us take the example of Andhra Pradesh itself again. Andhra Pradesh's debt burden stood at 97,000 crore at the time of bifurcation in June 2014. And in the past 6 years alone, it has climbed 5 times to 3,73,140 crore. Now, according to CAG's latest accounts from April to November 2020 alone, 73,811 crore was borrowed from different sources by the current YSRCP government as against the annual target of 48,295 crore. Now, since there is no productive expenditure in the state, there is very little focus on creating permanent revenue generating assets. Now, this kind of freebie culture, it is clear from Andhra Pradesh example that it is making people dependent on the government and also keeping them unemployed in a way, because neither are there jobs nor are there any revenue generating assets that the government is trying to create. Going by this freebie culture, which is spreading massively across India even today, where winning an election is the only motto of political parties, will empowering citizens and political leaders to work for development and create jobs and dignity for people really matter? Don't we have to think about it as voters? Do we not have concerns about increasing taxes while other sections benefit directly from these schemes? Will we have to keep paying higher taxes? Where does this put the taxpayer in the chain of voters? Does this really matter to any one of us? We need to think really hard about this.